Hi, in this video I'm gonna briefly explain what the density in embroidery means. Um, Basically, it shows the distancing between the lines of the stitch. So usually we have two types of stitch, the frill and satin, and when it comes to the distance, for example, for the frill, it means that so these are the line of the stitch that go back and forth, go back and forth, and the distance between these peaks are referred to as a density, not distance between each two adjacent line, but distance between this peak and this peak. The same for the satin is the distance between this peak and this peak referred to as a density. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that's defined. For example, here in the height software, I have the fill and the satin. So if I also I turn off on the underlay and full compensation, everything, so it can be seen. It's much easier. So if I zoom in on this, as you can see, it's a tatami fill, and the spacing is 0.4. So if I click on that, so it's the spacing 0.4. So if I zoom in and go ahead and measure the distance, so these are the stitching points. So if I measure the distance from to here, you'll see it's 0.4 millimeter. The distance between each two lines here, so it's going to be half of that. So if I come here and zoom, so let me zoom in somewhere here, so you'll see it's going to be 2. So it's hard to get it, but it's 0.2, about 0.2 millimeters. So basically the peak to peak distance is 0.4 and the distance between each of the adjacent line is 0.2. But here, as I said, if I click on that, so you see it is a 0.4, so it refers to this peak to peak. And as I said, it's defined here in the hatch is defined as a spacing, and it's basically the millimeter. The same for the satin. If I come here, click on that, and you see I set it on 0.4. Again, this is the distance between these two adjacent peaks. So it's a peak to peak, and if I go ahead and measure it again, you will see that it's going to be 0.4 millimeter in the satin stitch as well. So this is one way that we define it. It basically defines as a spacing and the distance. The other way, so I'm in Embroidery Stitch Artist. The other way is that if I click on, again I have fill and satin, if I click on that, you will see the density is defined by points. And in short, if I want to say what point is that, so basically 1 points represent 0.1 millimeter. So in other words, to define the points to millimeter, just divide whatever you have here by 10. So if I zoom here against here, because it's a 4 points means that it's 0.4 millimeter. So if I zoom here and measure it again, you will see that this distance here is, you can see it down here, it's going to show it here. So if I come here and click it here to here, you'll see that is 0.4 millimeter. Again, the distance between two adjacent line is going to be 0.2 millimeter. So the same here is for the satin. If I go ahead and click on this satin one, you'll see the density is 4 points. So basically it means that divide that by 10, so it's going to it's 4 points, so it's going to divide by 10, it's going to be 0.4 millimeters. So if I zoom in, you'll see that's 0.4 millimeter. The other, just it's a little bit counterintuitive. So here, when you increase the density, basically you increase the spacing or distance. So sometimes you think when you increase the density, you have to have more dense, but it's opposite here. So when you increase the density, you basically increase the distance here. One other thing I want to say, so I've seen is that if any of you using the ink stitch, uh, for the ink stitch, for the setting parameter is the same thing. So it's is the peak to peak distance. So similar to what we have here. So it's a peak to peak distance. But if you move as it, so you can see it showed the other was the peak to peak. But if you moved on to the fill stitch, it's a little bit different, and it says that spacing between the rows, and you will see here that it define the spacing between rows is defined the distances between two adjacent lines. So basically it's not from peak to peak, it's basically between these two lines. And so here, if you want to have the peak to peak, you have, for example, if you want to have the peak to peak of 0.4, you have to enter here 0.2, the adjacent to adjacent one. So enter 0.2 for the one next to each other. So you will 0.2 here. So basically you get 0.4 for the peak to peak. That's also another one that I want to mention. So I hope this helped to clarify what the density means.